What up, guys? Joachim here from Joachim Speaks in Tongues. And of course, when I say Joachim Speaks in Tongues, it is a reference to language learning. I'm speaking in multiple languages. And so a lot of my videos pertain to the topic of language learning, and that is what the channel is about. So today's topic is going to be on how long does it take to learn a language, or how long should you expect to learn a certain language if you're, say, in this case, a native English speaker. I'll assume that if you're watching this video, you probably at least speak English as a second or third language, if it's not your native language. And it's not, when I was in high school, so like 25 years ago, we would say like, oh, English is one of the hardest languages to speak. And it was almost like, our hardest languages to learn. And it was kind of like, almost like an arrogant thing. Like we thought that like our language is very complex. Turns out, no, it's not really as complex as we would have thought. It is a relatively modern language. It's not, you know, if you look at the Indo-European family of language trees, or language family tree, then English kind of has this odd mixture of groups. It's not quite as nice and tidy as you would see like a lot of other languages. European language tree, I'm looking it up right now. And so like this language tree, when you look at it, like, you know, you can find different ones, and some are simplified, some express different aspects of languages, and some would show different influences in different ways. But so English would fall under the category of German. It's a Germanic language. It's a language group that descends from German primarily, but you also see Old North Germanic descends into Old East Norse, which becomes Swedish and Danish. And from that Old East Norse, you see a line going over to English. Middle English has a lot of influences from Old French. Then, you know, there's also import words that come from various languages and different things like that. So when you answer a question like, how long does it take to learn a language? One of the biggest things that you have to answer is, how close is the language to your native language? And that would be probably the number one question you would want to ask, because if you're a English speaker that is learning a language that is very close to English, like probably German would be or maybe Danish, I'm not sure. Maybe not. Okay, so Danish doesn't show up on here. Say maybe you're learning, Spanish, French, German, any of those would kind of be as close or far away as the other to a native English language. Whereas if you're learning Japanese or Arabic, then both of those languages are relatively far away from English, so it's going to take you longer to learn them because they share a lot less commonality with your native language. So that's the answer, or that is the question that we are going to explore today. First, before I go any further, make sure that you hit that subscribe button to get updates, or to follow the channel for if you like what you're hearing, and to see upcoming videos. And then if you like what you're hearing, make sure you hit the like button. But anyway, so the linguist Steve Kaufmann's a polyglot. He owns a company called Lingq, L-I-N-G-Q. And they have quite a number of languages on there. It is intended to provide different resources for language learning. I don't remember the exact cost. I paid for a year membership myself, and I've used it in the past. I think it can be useful. It's not the only tool. I don't think it's like the end-all be-all of language learning resources, but you know, since I am studying primarily Greek, there is quite a number of resources on there, and I'm using their podcast to listen to the resources and materials from the Hellenic, I think it's the Hellenic University or something like that. That's free. It's on the internet. You can go to it for free. But you know, what Lingq has done is they provided it in a format where I can look up each individual word, and it has a dictionary built into it where I can look it up. So it just quickens the process of looking up that information. And then the not PDFs, the recordings of the speakers for the podcast that goes along with it is also on LingQ. So, I get all of those resources built up into one. So anyways, that's Steve Kaufmann and his company. So he is the one who kind of arranged this and put this together. I believe it is based on the FBI, the Foreign Services Institute, so not the FSI. And it's the Foreign Service Institute divides languages into groups or difficulty for speakers of English. So these are groupings based on how similar they are to the English language, modern English, and then that would reflect then how long it would take. So he lists these. Group 1 is French, German, Indonesian, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, Spanish, and Swahili. Group 2 is Bulgarian, Burmese, Greek, Hindi, Persian, and Urdu. That would be modern Greek. So if you went back to Koine Greek, it's probably going to fall into Greek group 3. If you go back to ancient Greek, it's probably not even, like, none of the languages today would be, it would be more difficult than just about any language if you're going back to the ancient form of Greek. So, that's further removed from any modern language. And that's true of these languages as well. If you go back to ancient Chinese is in group 4, then ancient Chinese is going to be far more difficult to learn than modern Chinese. That's kind of just the way it is. Group 3, Amharic. I think that Amharic is an Egyptian language. Today in Egypt, they speak Arabic. So they speak the Egyptian version of Arabic. So all of the Arabic countries have their own dialect of Arabic. And so that was not the ancient Egyptian language, though. That's a modern, since they were dominated. I don't know if it was the Ottoman Empire. I don't know what empire it was that took over. Maybe it was the Persians. I think the Persians took over Egypt, and so then they changed their language to not Coptic. It was Coptic, before. But I think Amharic is a version of that. I'm sorry, actually, Amharic is Ethiopian. So it's the ancient Ethiopian, and it's still spoken in Ethiopia today. So scratch what I said before. Sorry about that. Anyways, group 3 is Hebrews in there, Finnish, Hungarian, Lao, Polish, Russian, Serbo-Croatian, Thai, Turkish, Vietnamese. And then group 4, of course, is Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. So for a native English speaker, that group 4, those are languages that are the furthest from our native language for English speakers. Okay, so he takes it upon himself to give a rough estimate on how long it would take for you to learn the languages in each of those categories. And I think it reflects pretty well, because he doesn't do it by days. That's kind of how we like to think. How many months or years will it take for me to learn this language? But so he groups it by hours. So the FSI, the Foreign Service Institute of Research, indicates that it would take 480 hours to reach basic fluency in group 1 languages. So if you study an hour a day for 480 days, so a year, like a year and a third of a year, then you should basically come to some level of fluency. Did they define what fluency is, I think, would be a good question to ask. A basic fluency. So probably a B2 level is usually considered. They don't say this in here, I'm just sharing this with you. Usually on the Common European Framework of Reference, the B2 category would be the basic level of fluency, meaning you could have, I think he does go into it actually later on. I'm scrolling down through the page right now. He does mention what is considered basic fluency. So I'll just read from this for a moment. On the other hand, intensity has shown its own benefits. I have no doubt that someone following this intense program, which he lays out a program for language learning, would achieve basic conversational fluency in 2 months for easy languages and 3 months for difficult languages. Okay, so I think probably what he considers fluency is probably not quite maybe a B2 level. Or maybe my impression of a B2 level is not that accurate. But, if I say basic fluency, that means I'm able to have, like, very good conversations with people. I'm able to converse and have, like, understand what's being said, watch television, understand what's being said. Maybe I don't know every word, but, 95 or more % of the words, I'm going to have a meaning of what is being communicated. If I have a conversation with someone at church, because, there's Greek people that go to my church, then I'm going to I'm going to understand what they're saying if we're having a Greek conversation, and I'm going to take some meaningful content away from that conversation. So that's what I call basic fluency. Maybe that's considered higher, I'm not sure, but I learn languages so that I can do things like that. I want to be able to speak to people, understand what they're saying, and have that same degree of appreciation for what's being communicated in either language, Greek or English or any other language. So it's good to measure that in hours. And so if they're saying, 480 hours for one of the level 1 languages, which would be French, German, Indonesian, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, then if you extend it out to group 4, I would say probably, 2.5 times that. So maybe 1,000 hours would be more accurate or more accommodating for what you might expect to come to in what I'm identifying as a basic level of fluency in those languages. And I want to take, so 1,000 divided by 365 days, if we're studying an hour a day would be about 2 3/4 years. So 2.75 years approximately would bring you to a pretty good level of fluency in the most difficult of the languages. So, you're kind of looking at somewhere in that ballpark. And so that means, though, that in that hour per day that you're studying, you're not just listening, you're actually like reading native content, looking up the words, understanding the structure of the sentences. You are rehearsing, being able to say those words out loud or say them as sentences so that there's some development of fluidity when you say them. And yeah, all of those things should be well practiced. Typing, if we communicate online, then you should be able to type in that languages. So there should be review of information that you've had in the past. So usually I'll take a piece, I mentioned before, for example, the Hellenic University of America. It's a free program on the internet. I take one of those transcripts per day, and I'll usually do 2 or 3 days and of reading, listening, and then while I'm doing that, I'm also reviewing older ones. So I'll have 2 or 3 that I'm doing at a time, and then I'm also listening. So that's just 1 hour a day of doing things like that, reviewing, using the Anki flashcards. I use Anki, so there's that. But then, aside from that hour of like kind of focused practice, I'm also going back and listening to the podcast of transcripts of things that I've learned in the past as well. So, that's a lot of different areas. That would be more of an immersive way of learning. Not exactly immersive, because I'm not just throwing myself into listening to anything, but I'm intentionally listening to things that I've read and things that I have some understanding of, so I can follow along, and then the information that I'm getting is comprehensible. I think that comprehensible input is an important thing. Lots of people have talked about that. Stephen Krashen, the language professor, linguist professor, kind of coined that term. It's uniquely his. He coined it comprehensible input, meaning that you need to understand what it is that you're hearing. That's when we learn to understand communicated messages. That's when language learning takes place. So, like I mentioned, when I first looked at those transcripts, they were not comprehensible. I had no idea what it said. I had to sound out the words. I listened to the podcast. I read it. I looked up the definitions. I used Google Translate or any number of things. You kind of have to have some degree of understanding of the language to use Google Translate for a language like Greek, because it's not always accurate. So you have to be able to rightly divide if it's giving you an accurate depiction of those words, or if maybe there's something a little off about what it's saying. So that kind of comes with practice. I didn't begin learning that way, but anyway, so those are kind of just some rough estimates about how long it takes to learn a language and what you might expect to find along the way. I hope each of you are well, and I appreciate you watching. Take it easy, and I will talk to you in a video coming soon. If you have any questions, please put them in the information, in the comment section below. So just write them in there, and I will do my best to respond to them. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.